Hello everyone! In this video I will discuss how to write up the evaluation for the DP practical reports. So, at the end of the conclusion, as discussed in the previous video, you should have ended with a discussion of whether the systematic or the random error was dominant, okay? And so whether you were therefore seeking to explain larger random or systematic error. And this should lead directly into a discussion of at least 3 sources of error or methodological issues with the experiment. You're going to tabulate this discussion up in a table, but it's worth noting you should have paragraphs in each one of these blocks. Okay? For the source of error, you want to explain the error or issue here in a paragraph. Do not simply state what the issue is. Describe it. So something like reaction time is nowhere near sufficient. You want to explain what it is that was done that would lead to a deviation between the measured value and what the real quantity is. Remember, that's what error is. And so you want to give detail here. Humans can make errors for sure, but human error is not a type of error and is never sufficient. You need to specify what it is that the human did wrong, okay? Or did not do perfectly in a way that would produce error on your value. Then, once you have described that fully in that section, you're then going to state the effect on the collected or processed data. And this should lead naturally from the previous box. So, did it increase or decrease your measured values and why? Sorry, the why part actually is in the other box. It's in the sources of error description. So, you then want to explain the effect that would have on your later calculations. So explain the effect on the final determined quantity, on the aim. If it were systematic, which direction did it push your final value? Why? Okay? You want to accurately integrate use of systematic and random error and precision and accuracy in this discussion. This is very, very similar to the final column of the control variable table. It's a little more straightforward, actually, because it's not in the hypothetical. You are seeking to explain the actual effect of this source of error on your data. And then finally, in that third column, you want to have some realistic improvements. You want to explain them. So if you're going to give an improvement, all right, say what it improves and why. Discuss any possible issues with the actual equipment. And make sure that if it is a particular piece of equipment that you're referencing, that you fully reference it. Do not simply say something like, use a robot to release the object, okay? That, doesn't necessarily mean that it will be better. Machines don't necessarily do things better than people do, so you would need to explain why you think it would be better. And you also want to specify what it is, so you don't want to leave it in the abstract. It needs to be realistic and sort of actual, and so you should cite any equipment that you're proposing using. It is better to explain a realistic improvement that involves the appropriate use of tape than a sophisticated computer in the abstract. Notice that also means, because it should be realistic, that you shouldn't do things like explain that you can improve the experiment by conducting it in space. It needs to be realistic. Like, what's an actual thing you could do that would help you eliminate or reduce this source of error? And you should have at least 3 of these. Some experiments require more. You may have more to say, but you should at least have 3 written up and discussed. And I will say, it's better to have 3 sources of error that are thoroughly written up and discussed than to have 6 sources of error kind of half done. Finally, you should have your final evaluative paragraph or 2. So you answer the following questions in a couple of paragraphs. What was the overall scope? What do your conclusions apply to in retrospect? That is, how well did your experiment do at answering the aim? What were the limitations of the data? So just a summary. And to what extent can the conclusion be generalized? Finally, okay, in basically the final paragraph, this is important to extend out a little bit, you want to discuss how you would extend the experiment. Notice this is different from improve the experiment. To improve the experiment would be to answer your research question better than you have already answered it. To extend the experiment, you are asking a different or related or tangential research question. So what would other possible variants on this experiment be? How would you sort of ask further questions? And this should be no more than a paragraph or so, but you definitely want to answer your question here. Discuss and justify any claim that you make. Finally, in the DP Practical Reports Guide, you should know that there is a glossary for uncertainty and error. So it redefines all of these quantities. And when you first write these up, you are definitely going to make mistakes in the use of these terms. But what you want is over time to get better at it and to do your best to integrate discussion of uncertainty and error in the right sort of way. So just know that this particular glossary is here and that you have reference to it. You may also want to review topic 1.2.